Tonight on NEWSCENTER, after the attacks in Paris, many more are arrested in raids across France as Parisians try hard to get back to their daily lives. We have a correspondent on the ground. President Park Geun-hye is now in Manila to attend the APEC Leaders Summit. What will take center stage and what does the Korean president have in mind? Live reports from the Philippines to expert analysis, we have it covered. And Korea remembers all those who have sacrificed for this nation, marking the 76th Fallen Patriots Day on this Tuesday, November 17, 2015. We want to welcome our viewers in Korea and all around the world. I'm Moon Conn-young. France has vowed to scale up its military campaign to destroy ISIS following last week's deadly attacks in Paris. The French president has called for a UN Security Council meeting and says he'll soon be sitting down with the U.S. and Russian counterparts to discuss the counter-terrorism measures. Amid all this, ISIS has released a new video threatening further attacks. Arirang News' Connie Kim has our top story tonight.
French President François Hollande says France is intensifying its military campaign in Syria to root out terrorism.
We are at war against jihadist terrorists who threaten the whole world, not only France.
Addressing a special joint session of Parliament on Monday, Hollande called for a meeting of the UN Security Council to respond to the deadly Paris attacks and to prevent future terrorism. The French leader is expected to sit down with U.S. President Barack Obama and Russian President Vladimir Putin in the coming days to form a united coalition. Hollande also said he would seek to amend the French constitution so the nation can better deal with modern terrorist threats on top of extending the current national state of emergency by 3 months. A government source told AFP that the French government is also considering conducting surveillance on citizens returning from Syria. Threats of terrorism are not isolated to France. ISIS also released a new video Monday saying that countries conducting airstrikes on Syria would suffer a similar fate and promised specifically to target Washington, D.C. CIA Chief John Brennan said he hopes to see enhanced ties between the U.S. and Russia, saying the threat posed by ISIS calls for an unprecedented level of cooperation among the international intelligence community. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
France has mobilized 115,000 security personnel in the wake of Friday's Paris attacks by Islamist militants. For the latest on the situation in Paris, we connect live with our correspondent on the ground. Now, Aling, a huge manhunt is underway there for one of the suspects. Any progress on that investigation?
Yes, as you said, the investigations are going on. It appears that there are many connections between France and Belgium, and especially an area in the suburb of Brussels named Molenbeek, where many of these Islamist militants were living and prepared, apparently, these coordinated attacks in Paris the other day. So the manhunt is still going on, and part of the 8 attackers are identified. Some of them are French, and there may be a Syrian citizen among them.
Right, so progress is being made on that front. Now, how is the French government dealing with the situation after Friday's terror attacks? Any new measures in place?
Yes, there was a very dramatic speech by the President, François Hollande, between both chambers of Parliament, which is something quite rare in the country. And the President announced yesterday a series of measures, among them reform of the Constitution, to allow a state of emergency, a raise in police and justice officers and many other measures concerning defense. And the president, his message was very clear: France is at war and will wage this war against Daesh in France and in the Middle East.
Alan, tell me, what is the French people's response or reaction to the attacks?
People are in a shock, but we saw many signs of solidarity. There were no huge demonstrations like in January after the first attack against the Charlie magazine. Mm-hmm. But every night, people gather around the Place de la République, close to the places that were attacked, coming there with flowers, messages. And there's quite signs of solidarity and hopefully resilience.
Right, we could just only imagine. Now, are Parisians returning to normal daily lives now? Are they trying to adjust to the normal life?
Now people are going back progressively to normal, but still there's signs of upsetting, and people are quite afraid. You can notice that when you take the subway. People are looking around if everything's normal, and still there are many signs of consequences of these tragic events.
That was Alain Balouet, correspondent of Le Figaro, reporting for us from Paris. Meanwhile, a global sell-off was expected after the Paris attacks, but markets have taken it rather calmly. Still, concerns linger over how much of an impact it will have on Europe's consumption and whether it will take a toll on the overall global economy, including Korea. Our Hwang Ji-hye has more.
There were no major market jolts on the first trading day after Friday's terror attacks in Paris. Shares in the U.S. actually had their strongest session in 3 weeks on Monday. Stock markets in London and Frankfurt also closed up, with only Paris edging down a mere 0.08%. Analysts say the impacts of such surprises often fade within a short period of time.
When the terrorists strike, that's usually it for a while. We're on guard, we're looking harder. And I don't want to say it too lightly, because this is a very serious thing, but ultimately, does it affect the economy or doesn't affect the economy is what matters to the market, and I don't think it will.
Reflecting the muted reaction from global markets, Korea's benchmark Kospi also ended up around 1%, closing at 1,963.58. Although financial markets remained resilient, there are fears that Friday's attacks will hurt one of France's key industries and cause a further slowdown of the already weak economy. In Korea, the concern is that it could result in a drop in exports to France.
Around 7.5% of France's economy relates directly to tourism revenue, and therefore this is absolutely the last thing that the French economy needs. It will certainly encourage the European Central Bank to be more stimulative than otherwise might have been the case.
But Kim Wi-dae at the Korea Center for International Finance says any impact will be limited.
Korea's export exposure to France is very small. It's just 0.5% of our total export.
France stood as Korea's 30th largest export market last year, with total volume at around $2.5 billion. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye is now in Manila, the second leg of her three-nation tour. There, she'll attend the APEC Leaders Summit, where 21 heads of state are expected to exchange views on regional economic integration and building sustainable communities. Arirang News' Hwang Sung-hee is traveling with the president. She joins us from Manila. Now, Sung-hee, it'll be a busy next couple of days for the president.
Conn-young, President Park arrived here in Manila earlier this Tuesday to attend the APEC, where she and other Asia-Pacific leaders will discuss ways to build inclusive economies and sustainable and resilient communities. The two-day summit brings together 21 world leaders from countries including the United States, Japan, and China. APEC nations account for nearly 60% of the global GDP and almost half of the world's trade volume. On Wednesday, President Park is scheduled to hold bilateral summits with her Canadian and Filipino counterparts. With Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, the Korea-Canada Free Trade Agreement will be a main topic of discussion, as well as cooperation in climate change.
As the summit will be the first meeting between the two leaders, it will be an opportunity for them to get to know each other and intensify Korea and Canada's practical cooperation.
As for her meeting with Filipino President Benigno Aquino, attention is on whether President Park will give a clear stance on the South China Sea dispute. Later in the day, President Park will meet with the APEC Business Advisory Council and hold an unofficial dialogue with the Pacific Alliance, a Latin American trade bloc composed of Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru. The real game will be Thursday's summit, where President Park will lay out specific policy directives for inclusive growth based on South Korea's development experience. These include more support for small and mid-sized firms, human resources development, and bolstering rural communities. And since the annual forum is being held just days after the deadly terror attacks in Paris, the Philippines is on high alert and has vowed to tighten security, closing major streets and declaring next 2 days as public holidays to ensure a safe and efficient summit. Conn-young?
Right. It also remains to be seen whether the APEC, like the G20 summit in Turkey, will be overshadowed by the threat of terrorists following the Paris attacks. Thank you, Sang-hee. That was our Hwang Sang-hee reporting from Manila, the Philippines. Now, tensions run high in Manila, not just because of the heightened security level there, as it hosted leaders of the 21 APEC member nations. According to our Shin Se-min, the pressure is up as major diplomatic strategies are being discussed on the eve of the summit.
Leaders from around the world are now in Manila ahead of the two-day East Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. And already on the sidelines, there's chatter, mainly over tensions between the U.S. and China and the issue of maritime security. U.S. President Barack Obama said that he would visit the Philippine Navy's flagship, the U.S.-made Gregorio del Pilar, and will also sit down with his counterpart, Benigno Aquino, to discuss a wide range of issues, including disputes in the South China Sea and economic cooperation. Leaders of the 12-nation Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement are also slated to meet for the first time since they struck a deal together. But such moves are irking China, which is involved in bitter territorial conflicts at sea with the Philippines and other neighboring Asian countries. Chinese President Xi Jinping, however, aims to boost global economic development and sideline talks, spelling out his regional policies on cooperation in the Asia-Pacific. His focus will be on the economy, the progress on the construction of the Silk Road economic belt, and the 21st century maritime Silk Road, laying out opportunities the Beijing-pitched initiatives will bring to countries in the region. Earlier, China made clear that it does not want the focus of the summit to be on the South China Sea, but rather trade talks. Attention will be focused on how the sideline action will influence relations among the APEC member nations when the summit gets underway. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The APEC Forum brings together the heads of state of the organization's 21 member economies, including South Korea, the U.S., Japan, and Australia, which together account for nearly 60% of the global GDP, like our Hwang Sang-hee said, and almost half of world trade. Well, for an in-depth look into what should be discussed during this year's APEC summit and what the South Korean president should have in her hands leaving Manila, we're joined live in the studio by Kim Young-han, professor of economics at Sungkyunkwan University. Professor Kim, welcome to the program.
I'm glad to be here.
Now, President Park and the leaders of the APEC members, they are expected to exchange ideas on building a sustainable community and inclusive economies. Now, why was this agenda chosen for this year?
Well, I would say the recent kind of trends of increasing income inequality in APEC region, international inequalities, and also even in each individual country's domestic economy, they observe quite increasing trends of the income inequality and disparities. So that might be a driving force for them to choose so-called inclusive economic growth as the most important and driving force for the sustainable future economic growth. And also aggravating environmental issues, including the global warming issues, is also a big kind of headache issue. So that's another issue why they are discussing about so-called sustainable economic environment.
Well, what's also very noteworthy is the fact that the South Korean leader is expected to introduce a policy direction for these economies based on Korean experience.
Right.
Now, what are we talking about here in terms of policy directions, and what kind of a role do we expect South Korea to play as its, I guess, global economic power increases?
Well, say, according to the agenda that has been already prepared by the Secretariat of the APEC, they are trying to focus on the concrete policy tools, mainly focusing on small, finer kind of strategic policy tools to support small and medium-sized enterprises. Through those policies, supporting policies for small and medium enterprises, they expect so-called such an increasing income inequality might be reduced, or say more balanced kind of economic growth might be achievable through the heavy policy emphasis on supporting small and medium-sized enterprises. So that's one kind of place where South Korea can really play some leading role, because I would say South Korean government has been most successful in developing lots of concrete policy tools and means to support small and medium-sized enterprises, regardless of the actual eventual successfulness of those policies. Still, in terms of government effort to support those small and medium-sized enterprises, we have some leaderships in those policy experiences. And also, in addition, in the regional development, we have a long kind of experience, including so-called SEMAL movement, kind of agricultural regional development issues would be one of the also another leading edge we can play. So those two issues kind of mainly kind of to provide some tactics and tips on how to develop policy tools to support small and medium-sized enterprises, and also regional development issue would be another area we can make some contribution.
Sure. Now, I'm going to talk about Trans-Pacific Partnership. Well, there have been speculations that the Korean leaders' agenda, unofficial agenda this time around, would be promoting or expressing willingness for Korea to join the TPP to other member nations when they meet at the APEC summit in Manila. What is your forecast on this?
Well, actually, TPP is not official agenda, as you mentioned, of APEC. And actually, APEC has started its own discussion of arranging regional economic integration since last year, mainly initiated by China, under the title of so-called free trade area of the Asia Pacific. So it's at a much larger scale. So even from the strategic point, I would say it would not be really efficient for South Korea to raise that issues of TPP issues at these meetings. Instead of raising issue on TPP, probably to provide more emphasis on more in larger scale integration, such as an APEC-wide integration under the title of the free trade area of Asia Pacific would be, I would say, more beneficial even from the strategic standpoint.
Yeah, even from a strategic point of view for Korea. All right, Kim Young-han, Professor of Economics at Sungkyunkwan University, thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Koreans paid tribute on this Tuesday as the nation remembers all those who sacrificed and perished while fighting for Korea's independence from Japanese colonial rule. Our Kim Ji-won was at the 76th Patriot Martyrs Day ceremony and brings us this piece.
Citizens, relatives, and officials gathered at a special ceremony on Tuesday to pay silent tribute to the men and women who have sacrificed their lives for their country. The event commemorates Korea's 76th Patriot Martyrs' Day, held at the Kim-gu Museum and Library in Seoul. In his keynote speech, Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-ahn emphasized the significance of the Patriots' sacrifices and thanked them for their contributions toward making Korea what it is today. The next step for the country, he said, is to work toward achieving a strong, unified Korea.
I hope dialogue and cooperation between the two Koreas can resume, so relations between the two Koreas will improve.
On this day, 67 fallen patriots were recognized, including Hwang No-kwon, the grandson of Patriot Kwak Han-so. The senior Kwak is one of the thousands of patriots who gave their lives fighting for Korea's independence against Japan in the early 20th century.
I am very proud and happy to be here on behalf of my grandfather Kwak Han-so, and in honor of his name, I too will devote my life to the same cause, which I think has become the reunification of the two Koreas.
With the addition of the patriots recognized, the Korean government has so far given commendations to 14,264 fallen patriots. Fallen Patriots Day has been an official Memorial Day celebrated on November 17th since 1997. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
On this day, we remember and honor all of our fallen heroes. We commemorate their suffering and courage and allegiance to this country.
일본이 우리나라 독립운동한 이 순국선열에 대해서 너무나 참혹한 짓들을 많이 했죠. 고문을 하고 그다음에 차라리 이렇게 사형을 해서 사형을 집행을 하는 것은 차라리 인간적이라고 볼 수가 있는데 사형을 시키지 않고 서대문 형무소나 이런 데다 가둬놓고 거기에서 목숨을 끊지 않을 정도로 이렇게 고문을 해서 견디지 못하게 만든 거 이런 것들은 세계적으로도 그건 다 응징을 해서 그것은 정말 나쁜 일이라고 다 얘기를 하고 있잖아요. 독립운동을 하다가 그 독립운동으로 직접 목숨을 바친 분, 이분들이 여기에 모시고 있는 이 순국선열들입니다.
We brought you Korean media reports on the UN Secretary General's possible visit to North Korea this week. Well, we're getting more details on this Tuesday on that surprise trip. Our Song Ji-sun sheds light on what may have led to this breakthrough and what could come out of this very historic visit.
Following a report that UN Secretary General Park Geun-hye is planning to visit Pyongyang this week, there's a new report explaining how the visit may have been arranged. Citing a source in China, Radio Free Asia reported that Pan had made the request to North Korean Foreign Minister Lee Soo-yong while Ri was at the UN headquarters in September. Ri served as a guardian to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un while Kim was studying in Geneva. Ri was the North ambassador to Switzerland at the time. There has been no confirmation on whether a meeting with the North Korean leader is possible. But if the two do meet, Pan will likely try to bring about progress toward negotiations over the North nuclear ambitions, while Pyongyang, currently facing heavy sanctions for its nuclear tests, could use the visit to get sanctions relief. Seoul's Unification Ministry has confirmed that no documents had been submitted for Pan's visit until Tuesday. South Koreans must report to the ministry 3 days ahead of a visit to North Korea, or 10 days after their return. Pan would be only the third UN chief to visit the North and the first in more than 2 decades. Since taking the UN's top office in 2007, Pan has said he wanted to visit Pyongyang. He had planned a visit to the inter-Korean Kaesong Industrial Complex in May, but it was abruptly called off by the North at last minute without explanation. The former South Korean foreign minister is often tagged as a potential candidate in the next presidential election, and opinion polls have shown him as a likely favorite, although he has said on numerous occasions that, with a year until the end of his second term, he just wants to focus on his job. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Myanmar's transition to democracy in 2011 brought about significant economic development, including the lifting of Western sanctions 3 years ago, which helped to grow the country's middle class and boost the growth of small businesses. Well, after the victory of the opposition National League for Democracy party in last week's elections, spotlight is on whether the country will open up even further. For more on this, I'm joined in the studio by our very own Kim Min-ji. Good evening to you, Min-ji.
Good evening, Kan-young. So for 50 years, military dictatorship was in control of Myanmar, and it wasn't until about 5 years ago that economic and political reforms started taking shape. And now that Aung San Suu Kyi's party is on the helm, people expect that there's a better chance for these reforms to start taking root over the long term. Now, what will this mean in terms of Myanmar's partnerships with other countries? After the opposition NLD party won a majority in the nation's first democratic election in 25 years, attention is on how far Suu Kyi will carry out sweeping reforms leading the country towards a free economy. Myanmar, also known as Burma, branded by the IMF as Asia's final frontier, has a population of 60 million, and since 2011, its GDP growth has been on an upward trend. The country's attractive geographical location connects it with China, India, and other ASEAN members, providing access to a market of roughly 3 billion people.
Myanmar has huge potential. Should the U.S. lift trade sanctions on Myanmar, it could speed up the opening process as well as improve investment environment down the line.
Myanmar has also an abundant pool of cheap labor, half the price of Vietnam, and only a fifth of China, and has ample natural and metal resources. According to London-based Chatham House, foreign direct investment there rose tenfold to over $4 billion between 2009 and 2014. And experts say there's room for Korea to increase its footing.
Korea and Myanmar can establish complementary relations. We have strength when it comes to economic development and capital, while Myanmar has ample labor resources and a big domestic market.
But there are some drawbacks. Myanmar ranks near the bottom when it comes to doing business.
They lack infrastructure, making it hard for firms to survive. In addition, they lack electricity in many areas, and renting land's expensive.
Experts say companies shouldn't expect quick returns, adding that both companies and the government should work together to create synergy.
A number of Korean companies have already tapped into the Myanmar market and have already made inroads.
Yes, that's right. And in various sectors, including manufacturing, services, and even food. And to name a few, Daewoo International has been in the development of gas fields there. And Lotte Construction is also planning to work on building the highways in the commercial capital of Yangon.
And more infrastructural developments are set to take place in that country in the months and years to come.
Yes, experts say Myanmar is a little bit like Korea in the 1970s. So we have an idea of what kind of improvements they need. But experts say Myanmar is in a better position to attract foreign capital because of technological advancements and globalization compared to Korea back then.
Right. However, still a ways to go. But it seems to be on the right track.
That's right.
All right, Min-ji, thank you so much for that report.
Thank you.
In roughly 2 months' time, leaders from all walks of life will gather in the Swiss town of Davos to discuss the world's most pressing issues. Over the years, Korea has transformed into an advanced economy. So has the country's status in the international arena as well as the World Economic Forum. Not only is Korea taking part in identifying the global challenges facing the world today, but in fact is at the forefront of a worldwide revolution. How so? Well, you'll find out in this final piece of my 3-week-long coverage of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Meet Hubo. This humanoid robot can run, perhaps even faster than I do. It can withstand balance, do push-ups, and drive. That we've known for years. But the latest Hubo can not only perform manual jobs, but also perform analytical tasks once seen as requiring human judgment, based on artificial intelligence. Leading the world's artificial intelligence and automation technology and home to the latest Hubo is KAIST, or Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. And KAIST-made Hubo is flying to Davos.
At the upcoming Davos Forum in January, KAIST will showcase and give a demo session on our world-renowned Hubo robots and hold discussion sessions about our world-class technology.
Earlier this year, Team KAIST's DRC Hubo humanoid robot defeated 22 others to win the top $2 million prize from the U.S. Department of Defense's DARPA Research Unit. The contest this year was a battle of robots on an obstacle course meant to simulate conditions similar to the 2011 Fukushima nuclear plant disaster.
Also, some of our leading researchers in the field will hold idea labs on the development of future healthcare, which is becoming more important now than ever.
The robots had an hour to complete a series of tasks, somewhat autonomously, with intermittent connectivity with their operators to simulate real disaster conditions.
In my case, I'm using biotech to replace a lot of fossil-dependent production system from with a sustainable bio-based route. So, for example, we use engineered microorganisms to produce a lot of different chemicals, materials, fuels from non-food renewable biomass, because it's the only way you can actually get the tangible materials without using fossil resources.
Lee Sang-yeop is a prominent bioengineer and a longtime member of the World Economic Forum, having chaired various councils and now part of a meta-council of emerging technologies. As global warming becomes an increasingly urgent problem, Lee's discovery of a novel technology to produce gasoline by a bioengineered microorganisms as a solution to someday wean off of fossil fuels has gained outstanding recognition from all over the world.
You can do the same thing for gasoline, plastics, etc.
Right, so this by this process, you would create from microorganism gasoline.
Gasoline, succinic acid, whatever you want. Yes. So we have developed many different strains producing different types of chemicals, materials, fuels, and even drugs.
Not only that, this Korean scientist has another breakthrough technology to present to the global audience in Davos.
How to change the paradigm of discovering new medicine. So that's what I'm going to talk about. But I'm going to use basically traditional Oriental medicine as an example. 400 years old Dongyi Bogam. It's written by Hojun, as you know. So that's going to be quite new, and I'm excited too. So how to marry traditional medicine with modern biology and medical sciences. That probably will be the future of human healthcare.
The fourth industrial revolution, the rapid proliferation of innovative technologies in artificial intelligence, biotechnology, nanotechnology, robotics, and 3D printing will have broad and deep impact on all aspects of life. In fact, it's already upon us. And at the epicenter of the new revolution, leading the drive, is Korea's homegrown technology.
In the future, it will be not anymore the big fish which eats the small fish. It will be the fast fish which eats the slow fish. The new technological revolution will come like a tsunami.
Next time they meet, they'll be in their snow boots and in jackets, and perhaps closer to the fourth industrial revolution. This is where the fourth industrial revolution begins. This is where the road to Davos begins. Well, I can tell you that the weather conditions today were quite unusual for this time of the year. Let's check in with our Lee Ji-hyun at the Weather Center for more details. Jihan.
Hello there, Conn-young. Yes, it did feel like mid-October today with the daily high here in Seoul getting up to 19.3 degrees Celsius. But things are about to change as we have more rain in the store for tomorrow, with the East Coast and Jeju Island expected to receive between 5 and 30 millimeters, while the rest will see less than 5. But for those of you in the mountainous regions of Gangwon-do province, you'll see light snow flurries during the day, but most of the rain will let up in the late afternoon, while it should persist until Thursday for the eastern coastal regions. So the mix of rain and clouds will bring down the mercury about 3 to 6 degrees down, but still higher than the average. On that note, here are the readings for tomorrow. Daily high here in Seoul will hike up to 13, while Daegu and Gwangju will peak at 14 and 16. And as for the other regions, Daejeon and Jeju Island will see a high of 14 and 17. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
That is our broadcast on this Tuesday night. I'm Moon Conn-young. Thank you all for watching. We hope to see you right back here, same time tomorrow on NewsCenter.